Wealthy CEO pretends to sleep to test his shy black maid, then freezes at what she does. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. The evening was quiet in the lavish mansion of the CEO, Michael Weston. The golden chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished floors, and the scent of freshly cooked dinner still lingered in the air. Michael, a powerful and wealthy CEO in his early 40s, was lying on the velvet sofa, his eyes closed as if in rest. But in reality, he wasn't sleeping. He was watching carefully, with an almost calculating gaze, as his new maid, a shy, young black woman named Sarah, entered the room. Sarah had been working for Michael for only a few weeks, and already, she could feel the subtle judgments from him. The cold glances, the dismissive nods, and the occasional sarcastic comments about her lack of experience made her feel small and out of place. But she needed the job. Her family depended on it. She had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were limited, and this job at the Weston Mansion seemed like her only chance to change her life. Despite her efforts to stay invisible, to blend into the background as she had always done, she couldn't help but feel the weight of his expectations. Tonight was no different. Michael had just finished his dinner, and Sarah was clearing the table when he made a sudden request. He asked her to bring him a glass of water. Sarah hesitated for a moment. She had heard him talk down to the other staff, but she had never directly experienced it. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the water, and she carefully walked over to him, trying not to make a sound, as if she were invisible. But Michael was watching her every move, his eyes barely open, as though pretending to sleep. Sarah had learned to ignore the awkwardness, but tonight, something felt different. She could sense that Michael was testing her in some way. He never let anyone serve him in such close proximity. She bent down slightly to offer him the glass, her nervousness barely contained. "You've been doing a good job, Sarah." Michael's voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was something cold in it. Sarah froze for a moment, wondering if she had misheard. "Thank you, sir," she managed to reply, her voice barely audible. Michael then let out a soft chuckle, almost as if he were mocking her. The room was filled with an unsettling silence. He hadn't moved, and his eyes remained shut. For a moment, Sarah thought he might be asleep, but that was when she heard it. The tiniest of sounds. A soft gasp, followed by a slow exhale. Michael's gaze snapped open, and for the first time since Sarah had been employed here, she saw something shift in his expression. His eyes widened ever so slightly. She had thought nothing of it when she placed the glass of water carefully beside him. But now, as she stood there, her hands at her sides, she noticed something strange. Michael was staring at her, completely caught off guard. What had she done? Why had he reacted this way? Had she done something wrong? She glanced down at herself, trying to figure it out. Was there a stain on her uniform? Did she make a mistake? But nothing seemed off. "You speak 4 languages?" Michael's voice was low, but now there was a strange sense of admiration mixed with disbelief. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. Michael had never heard her speak any language other than English. How could he know? And then it hit her. The glass she had handed him earlier had been a test to see how she would respond to him. It was always the small things, the subtle ways he made her feel less than. But tonight, something had changed. Sarah, with a deep breath, straightened her posture. Her head held high. She finally spoke. "I speak French, Spanish, German, and Italian, sir." Michael's expression faltered, and for a brief moment, he looked like a man who had just realized he was wrong about someone. Sarah felt a slight rush of pride in her chest. He hadn't expected her to be more than the timid maid he saw before him. And now, standing before him, she knew she had just gained something far more valuable than respect. She had gained his attention. The silence hung heavy in the room as Sarah stood, still processing Michael's words. She had never expected this kind of reaction from him. For weeks, she had been working under his cold, judgmental gaze, always feeling like she was walking on eggshells. Yet now, for the first time, she could sense a shift in the air. Michael, the powerful CEO who always held all the cards, was caught off guard. His eyes lingered on her, as if trying to understand who she really was beneath the surface. Sarah had always been underestimated, dismissed by people like him. But tonight, something was different. The shift was subtle, but it was undeniable. Her mind raced as she tried to steady her breathing. For a moment, she thought about the world she had come from, the hardships, the struggles to make ends meet. She had learned to keep her head down, to not draw attention to herself. But now, standing in this room with the CEO of a major company, she felt a strange sense of empowerment. Michael finally broke the silence, his voice low and measured. "I had no idea. I assumed." He trailed off, his words hanging in the air. Sarah remained silent, not knowing exactly what to say. She had grown so used to people underestimating her, assuming she was just another face in the crowd. But she wasn't just another maid. "You speak 4 languages, and I didn't even know your name until now," Michael continued, his tone more thoughtful than before. Sarah stood up a little straighter, still unsure of how to respond. She had always been taught that speaking up could bring consequences, but this time, something inside her told her that the rules might be different. She had nothing to lose. "My name is Sarah," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the nervousness she felt inside. "I didn't come here to be invisible, Mr. Weston." Michael's gaze softened, just for a moment, but it was enough for Sarah to notice. He leaned back in the chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. The power dynamic had shifted in that instant. The CEO, the man who had all the wealth and control, was now the one on the back foot. Sarah didn't say another word. She turned and began walking toward the door, but before she could leave, Michael's voice stopped her. "Sarah," he called out. She turned, her heart pounding. I appreciate your honesty." Sarah paused, trying to process what she had just heard. He hadn't apologized, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that for the first time, Michael Weston, the CEO, had seen her for who she truly was. Not just a maid, but a person with value, with a story, with a mind that could offer more than just service. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, before exiting the room. As Sarah walked down the long, empty hallway, she could feel a strange weight lifting off her shoulders. She wasn't sure what would come of this encounter, but for the first time since working at the Weston mansion, she felt like she might just have a future here, one that didn't involve simply being overlooked. She could feel the shift in the air, the subtle recognition that she had power, too. It was just the beginning. The next few days felt different for Sarah. It wasn't just the quiet respect she had earned from Michael. There was something more, a subtle, unspoken change in the way the entire house felt. The servants, once distant and cold, now acknowledged her with a hint of recognition, as though they too had witnessed something shift in the air. She could sense their curiosity, but she remained focused on her work, determined not to make waves. Michael, however, had not let the incident go. Though he never spoke of it directly, she noticed the occasional glances he threw her way. His attitude had changed, albeit subtly, towards her. He no longer treated her as an invisible servant, but as someone who had a voice. The change was small, but it was there. One afternoon, Sarah was working in the study, organizing some paperwork, when Michael walked in. He didn't seem as confident as usual. His steps were slower, and there was a slight unease in his posture. He stood by the desk, silent for a moment, as if debating something. "Sarah," he said, his voice more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah looked up, surprised. "Of course, Mr. Weston." He took a deep breath and leaned against the desk. "What? Do you really think of the direction the company is headed? I mean, as someone who sees things differently from the people in my circle." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the question. She had never expected him to ask for her opinion, let alone about something as important as his company's future. She paused, thinking carefully before responding. "Well, sir, I think people are getting lost in the numbers and not seeing the bigger picture. The company is about people, not just profits. If you don't consider the people who actually do the work, the ones who keep everything running, you'll lose touch with what truly matters." Michael didn't speak right away. He just stared at her, processing her words. For a long moment, the room was quiet, save for the sound of the clock ticking softly on the wall. Finally, he nodded, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on growth and expansion that I forgot about the people who actually make it happen." Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. but she could tell that Michael was genuinely reflecting on what she had said. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one that Sarah had never expected from him. She had always seen him as a powerful man, but now she was starting to see a different side of him, a side that struggled with the same issues that so many people faced. "Thank you for being honest with me," Michael added, his voice soft. "I think I've been too caught up in my own world to realize how disconnected I've become from everything else." Sarah felt a strange sense of pride at his admission. It wasn't just that she had been right. It was the fact that Michael had the courage to admit he had made mistakes. That was more than she could have hoped for. "I'm just trying to do what's best, sir," she said quietly, her voice filled with a newfound confidence. Michael met her gaze for a moment before nodding. "You've given me a lot to think about, Sarah." "Thank you." Sarah smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She knew she had said something important, but more than that, she knew that this conversation had changed something. It had changed how Michael saw her, and it had changed how she saw herself. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone with a voice, someone who had something valuable to say. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that the future she had always dreamed of wasn't so far out of reach. The following week, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the way Michael interacted with her. It was as if a barrier had been lifted, and for the first time since she began working in the Weston mansion, she felt as though she was being treated like an equal. He still held all the power, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement of her worth that made her feel more seen than ever before. One afternoon, Michael called her into his office. She had been organizing documents in the hallway when one of his assistants approached and asked her to come in. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what this meeting would be about. Was she being reassigned? Was this a way to test her further? She walked in slowly, trying to calm her nerves. Michael was sitting at his desk, his usual air of confidence in place, but there was a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Sarah, come in, please," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. Sarah took a seat, her palms resting on her lap. Michael leaned forward, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation the other day," he said, "and I realized that I've been neglecting some important aspects of my company and my life." Sarah nodded, not knowing what to say. She had spoken candidly to him before, but now it felt as if their roles were changing in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. "I'm planning to make some changes around here, Sarah," Michael continued, his tone sincere. "I want to focus more on people, my employees, the ones who make this company run. And I need someone who can help me understand what we're missing. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm ready to listen." Sarah sat there, stunned by his words. She had heard of CEOs making speeches about change, but she had never expected this from Michael. He wasn't just talking about the company. He was talking about himself, admitting his flaws. "I want you to help me," he said finally, his gaze steady. "I know I've been dismissive before, but you've got a perspective I need. I'd like you to be more involved in some of the decision-making processes around here." Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't a job she had signed up for. She had never imagined that her voice would carry this much weight in a company like this. But the more Michael spoke, the more she realized that this was an opportunity, one that she couldn't afford to turn down. I don't know if I'm qualified for that, sir," she said hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be an expert," Michael replied, his tone reassuring. "I just need someone with honesty, someone who understands the importance of the people behind the work. I've been so caught up in the business side that I've neglected the heart of it all. You can help me fix that." For the first time, Sarah saw Michael in a new light. He wasn't the untouchable CEO anymore. He was a man who had made mistakes and was willing to learn. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was seeing her for more than just a maid. "I'll do my best," she said softly. "I won't let you down." Michael smiled, his eyes softening. "I know you won't." As Sarah left his office, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. She had just been given a chance that most people could only dream of, an opportunity to make a difference in a company like Weston Enterprises. But with that opportunity came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. Still, she couldn't deny the surge of pride she felt as she walked back to her duties. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was part of something bigger, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. As the days went on, Sarah found herself adjusting to this new role that Michael had given her. It was strange at first. The idea of being more involved in the company's decision-making felt like a dream, but it also brought a weight of responsibility she hadn't anticipated. She was no longer just the maid. She was now an advisor of sorts, her voice being heard in rooms she never imagined entering. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when self-doubt crept in. Would they respect her? Would they take her seriously? But every time she spoke up, she felt a sense of power growing inside her. Michael continued to trust her insights, often asking for her thoughts on various issues within the company. The more she spoke, the more she realized that she wasn't just here to do the menial tasks anymore. She had the potential to make a real impact. One afternoon, Michael invited her into a meeting with the senior team. As she entered the conference room, she was met with surprised and curious glances. The room was filled with well-dressed men and women, all in suits, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves as she sat at the head of the table next to Michael. He gave her a reassuring smile, his silent support making her feel a little more at ease. "Sarah," Michael began, turning to face the room. "As we've discussed, we're looking to shift the company's focus. It's not just about growth anymore. It's about people. And Sarah, as someone who sees the company from a different perspective, has been invaluable in helping me understand what we've been missing." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sarah felt all eyes on her, but she held her ground. This was her moment to speak, to show them that she belonged here, just as much as they did. "I think what's missing is the connection between the upper management and the people who work on the ground," she said, her voice steady. "The people who do the hard work, day in and day out, often feel like they don't matter. But if we change that, if we show them that they are valued, it'll make a difference." There was a murmur of agreement from some members of the team, but others seemed unsure. Michael nodded, encouraging Sarah to continue. "I've seen how hard the employees work, but I've also seen how little recognition they get. It's not just about monetary rewards. It's about showing appreciation, acknowledging their efforts. If we make that a priority, we'll see a shift in the company culture." Sarah felt a wave of pride as she spoke, knowing that her words were not only being heard but considered. She had always believed that people were the backbone of any successful organization, and now for the first time, she was in a position to make that belief known. Michael looked around the room, his eyes meeting the gaze of his team members. "This is why we're making changes," he said, his voice firm. "We need to do better. We need to connect with our people." The team members exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others deep in thought. For the first time, Sarah felt that she was not just a voice in the background, but a part of something larger. As the meeting came to a close, Michael turned to Sarah, his expression softer than usual. "You did well today," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, grateful for his support. "Thank you, sir." She left the room with a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was a part of the company's future, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. As weeks passed, Sarah's new role in the company began to feel more real, more permanent. Michael had given her the opportunity to contribute in ways she had never imagined, and slowly, she started to see the impact of her efforts. The employees in the lower levels were responding positively to the changes she had advocated for. More recognition, more appreciation, and the company's atmosphere was shifting. People were starting to feel valued again, and morale was at an all-time high. Michael noticed it too. The company's numbers were improving, but it wasn't just about the bottom line. The true success, Michael realized, lay in the transformation happening within his team. One morning, Sarah was sitting in her office, reviewing some reports, when Michael walked in. He was holding a stack of papers, but his usual air of confidence was gone. Instead, he looked a bit more unsettled than usual. "Sarah," he began, his voice tight. "I need your advice on something." Sarah looked up, surprised. She had become accustomed to Michael coming to her for input, but today, his demeanor was different. "Of course, sir," she replied, setting aside the reports. Michael sat down in the chair across from her, placing the papers on the desk. "I've been offered a major deal," he said, his voice lower now. "It could double the company's revenue in a matter of months. But there's a catch. The deal is with a company that's controversial. They've been linked to unethical practices, and I don't know if we should move forward with it." Sarah listened carefully, her mind processing the situation. She had seen the way Michael's company operated. always about growth, always about profits. But this was a different kind of decision. What does your gut tell you? She asked softly. Michael paused, as if the question had caught him off guard. He seemed to be thinking, weighing the options. Finally, he sighed. My gut says we could make a lot of money, but I don't want to sacrifice my integrity for a quick fix. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her hands folded on the desk. It's not just about the money, Michael, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's about what you stand for. The company's success isn't only measured by how much profit you make. It's about the kind of legacy you leave behind. If you make this deal, you might be setting a precedent that will define your company's future in ways you don't want. Michael looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. For the first time, Sarah saw the weight of leadership on his shoulders, the kind that came with decisions that could make or break everything. I've been so focused on growth, Michael admitted. I've neglected the bigger picture. I forgot about the values that brought me here in the first place. He stood up slowly, pacing in front of the desk. I don't know what to do, Sarah. Sarah followed him with her gaze, her heart pounding. She knew this was a critical moment, one that could shape both Michael's future and her own. It's your company, Michael, she said gently. But I think you already know the answer. Michael stopped pacing and turned to face her. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, with a small nod, he spoke. I think you're right. I don't want to sacrifice everything for a deal that doesn't align with my values. He paused, as if making a final decision. We're not going to take it. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Michael had made the right choice, and in that moment, she realized how far they had come together. The changes she had pushed for, the values she had emphasized, were starting to take root in him too. As Michael left the room, he turned to her with a smile. Thank you, Sarah. I needed someone to help me see what was important. Sarah smiled back, her confidence growing. Anytime, sir. As she sat back in her chair, she couldn't help but think about how much had changed. From the shy, invisible maid to someone who had the power to influence decisions in a major corporation. This was only the beginning. She knew that the future held even more challenges, but she also knew that she was ready for them. Weeks passed, and the changes in the company were undeniable. Michael had stayed true to his word. The decision to turn down the controversial deal had been the catalyst for a shift in the company's culture, and the impact of that decision rippled through every level of the organization. Employees felt more valued, more heard, and morale was steadily climbing. Sarah had become more than just a confidant. She was now an integral part of the team's leadership, her insights and ideas regularly sought after in meetings. Michael had truly begun to rely on her judgment, and it wasn't just in business matters. He seemed to genuinely respect her thoughts and opinions, not only as an employee but as a person. One morning, Michael called Sarah into his office again. She had been busy working on a report when his assistant told her to come in. She had grown used to the invitation, but today there was something different in the air. When Sarah entered the office, she found Michael standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He didn't turn around immediately, but spoke to her in a soft voice. Sarah, I've been thinking, he said, his tone more serious than usual. I can't keep doing this alone. You've become such an important part of this company, and I can't help but feel like I owe you more than just a position here. I owe you a chance to lead with me, not just serve. Sarah was taken aback. She had never expected this, never even dreamed that Michael would view her in such a way. What do you mean, sir? She asked, her voice steady, but her heart racing. Michael turned to face her, and for the first time, there was no distance between them. No formalities. Just two people having an honest conversation. I want to offer you a leadership position. You've shown me, and everyone here, that you're more than capable. Your ideas, your perspective, those are what this company needs. And I can't keep pretending that you're just here to serve. You've earned more than that, Sarah. You deserve to be at the table with the rest of us. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. This was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The shy, quiet maid who had entered this mansion months ago had become someone with the power to make decisions that shaped the company's future. But I'm not qualified for this, Sarah said, shaking her head. I don't have the experience that the others have. Michael smiled softly, a knowing smile. You've got something far more valuable than experience, Sarah. You have integrity, a sense of what's right, and a vision for something greater. That's more important than any experience could ever give you. Sarah stood still, processing his words. She had never seen herself as someone worthy of such a role. She had always been told that people like her didn't get chances like this. But now, Michael was offering her something that felt impossible and yet, somehow, completely attainable. "I don't know what to say," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to say anything right now," Michael said, his tone kind. "Take some time to think about it. I just wanted you to know that I believe in you, and I want you to have the same opportunities to succeed that anyone else here has." The weight of his words settled on Sarah's shoulders, but it wasn't a burden. It was a gift. She had never imagined that she could rise to such heights, that she could go from being invisible to being seen as a leader in her own right. As she left his office that day, Sarah's mind was spinning with the possibilities. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and setbacks. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of them. She knew that she had something powerful inside of her. And maybe, just maybe, it was her time to take the next step. The following week, Sarah found herself in a whirlwind of emotions. She had been given the chance to take on a leadership role, but as she sat in her office, surrounded by the weight of the decisions ahead of her, doubt crept in. Could she really handle this responsibility? Would the rest of the team respect her, knowing she had come from a place of servitude? These questions lingered in her mind as she stared at the piles of paperwork in front of her, trying to gather her thoughts. But despite the uncertainty, there was a flicker of something deep inside her, a feeling that she was on the verge of something big, something that could change not just her life, but the lives of others around her. One afternoon, Michael called her into his office once again. His voice on the intercom was calm but firm, asking her to join him immediately. As Sarah walked through the familiar halls of the mansion, her heart raced. She had grown used to their conversations, but this time, it felt different. When she entered, Michael was seated at his desk, looking over some documents. He looked up as she entered, his face serious. "Sarah," he began, "I need your help with something important. We're about to make a major decision regarding the direction of the company, and I want your input. I trust your judgment." Sarah felt a rush of pride, but also a sense of pressure. Michael had been giving her more responsibility, but this felt like it was on another level. "Of course, sir," she replied, her voice steady but her mind racing. Michael slid a set of papers across the desk to her. "This is a proposal for a new partnership. It could open doors to international markets, but it's a risk. I need someone who understands the people behind the business, not just the numbers. I need you to look at this with a fresh perspective and tell me if it's worth pursuing." Sarah took a deep breath as she skimmed through the proposal. The numbers were impressive, promises of vast expansion, huge revenue streams, and more. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with her. As she read, she could feel the familiar pull of her instincts, the same instincts that had guided her through difficult situations before. "There's something off about this," she said quietly, not looking up from the document. "It's focusing too much on profit and not enough on how this will affect the people. I understand the allure of international markets, but if the company loses sight of its core values, it could backfire. The people we work with, the people who make this business run, those are the ones who will feel the consequences." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as he listened, and for a moment, there was silence. He leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "You're right," he said slowly. "I've been so focused on growth and expansion that I've forgotten why we started this company in the first place. It wasn't just to make money. It was to make a difference." Sarah looked up at him, surprised by the depth of his admission. Michael was not the man she had first met. He was evolving, becoming more self-aware, and it seemed that she had played a part in that. "I think we need to find a way to expand, but we need to do it with integrity," she continued. "We need to stay true to our values, not just chase after numbers. If we can build partnerships that align with our mission, that would be the kind of success that lasts." Michael sat silently for a moment, then nodded. "I agree. We'll need to be more selective. Thank you, Sarah. You've helped me see the bigger picture." Sarah felt a quiet sense of satisfaction as she stood up, the weight of the conversation settling on her. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time, it seemed to resonate with Michael in a way that was profound. As she left the room, she felt a surge of confidence. This was her moment. She was no longer just the maid. She was a trusted leader, a voice of reason in a world of power and money. And as she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but think, this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were both exhilarating and challenging for Sarah. Her new role had brought with it a sense of purpose, but it also came with a set of expectations that sometimes felt overwhelming. Despite her initial hesitation, she had embraced the responsibility, confident that she was making a real difference in the company. The changes she had championed were beginning to show tangible results. Employees were more engaged, the atmosphere was lighter, and even the clients were taking notice of the shift in culture. Michael, too, was thriving. His leadership had grown more self-assured, and he leaned on Sarah for more than just advice on business strategies. He sought her input on the company's culture, ethics, and vision. One afternoon, as Sarah walked through the hallways of the mansion, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Michael asking her to join him in the conference room. She had become accustomed to these sudden calls, but today there was a sense of urgency in his message. As she entered the room, Michael was standing near the window, looking out at the city below. He turned as she stepped inside, his face set with determination. "Sarah, we have a problem," he began. "I just got word that one of our top investors is pulling out. They're unhappy with our recent decisions, especially the changes we've made in the company culture. They want us to go back to the old ways, focus solely on profit and expansion, and forget about the people." Sarah felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She had expected some pushback, but this was different. "What do you plan to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease inside her. Michael paused, running a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to fight for what we've built, but the other part of me knows how much we need their support. Without their investment, we could lose everything." Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment where all of the changes they had fought for were being tested. "Michael, you've built something special here," she said slowly, her words carefully considered. "But if we go back to the old ways, we'll just be repeating the same mistakes. We can't let fear dictate our decisions. We need to stay true to our values, no matter the cost. It's what makes us different from everyone else." Michael's gaze softened, and for a moment, it seemed as though he was considering her words. But then he shook his head. "I know, but this is a huge risk. If we lose this investor, it could be the end of everything." Sarah stepped closer to him, her voice unwavering. "Sometimes, doing the right thing means taking a risk. If we stand firm in our values, even when it's hard, we'll earn the respect of the people who matter. If we compromise now, we're telling everyone that our integrity is for sale." Michael looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah could see the internal struggle in his eyes. He wanted to protect the company, but he also knew that she was right. "You're right," he finally said, his voice quieter. "We can't let them dictate who we are." He looked down at the papers on the table, then back at Sarah. "We'll fight for the company we've built, for the people we've promised to support. If we lose everything, we lose everything. But at least we'll know we did the right thing." Sarah smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. This was the moment she had hoped for, the moment when Michael fully embraced the values they had fought for together. As she left the room, she knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt certain about the direction they were headed. They were no longer just fighting for profit or growth. They were fighting for something much bigger. And that, she realized, was the true foundation of their success. The weeks that followed were some of the most intense in the company's history. Michael's decision to stand firm on their values, despite the pressure from the investor, set the tone for everything that came after. There were difficult meetings, challenging conversations, and moments where it felt like they might lose it all. But despite the fear, Sarah could see the company and its leadership begin to transform. Michael, once solely driven by growth and expansion, had become a man who now cared deeply about the people behind the work. He was determined to make sure that they were building something that would last, not just for them, but for future generations. One afternoon, Sarah was reviewing some of the new partnership proposals when Michael walked into her office. There was a look of determination on his face, but also a sense of relief. "We did it," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "The investors have agreed to the new direction. They're on board with our vision." Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They had done it. They had stood up for what was right, and it had paid off. "I knew we would," she said, smiling back. "This is just the beginning, Michael. We have to keep pushing forward, but now we have the support we need." Michael nodded, sitting down across from her. You've been the driving force behind this, Sarah. I can't thank you enough for all you've done. I don't think we would be here without you. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was hard to believe how far she had come since that first day at the mansion. From the shy, overlooked maid to someone who had earned the trust of the CEO and the respect of the entire company. This journey had changed her in ways she couldn't even put into words. I'm just doing my job, Michael, she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. You've been a great leader, and together, we've built something special. Michael looked at her for a moment, his expression softening. No, Sarah, you've done more than that. You've helped me become a better leader. You've reminded me of what truly matters. For the first time, Sarah saw Michael not just as a boss, but as a man who was growing alongside her. They had both learned from each other, and it felt like they were in this together, fighting for the same cause. Thank you, he said quietly, for believing in me, for believing in us. Sarah smiled, the weight of everything they had been through together settling in. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about values, integrity, and the people who made it all happen. I think we've only just begun, Michael, she said, her voice filled with conviction. There's so much more we can do. Let's make sure we keep doing it the right way. As Michael stood to leave, he turned back to her. I'm proud of you, Sarah, and I'm proud of what we've built. Sarah watched him walk out, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, she knew exactly where she was headed. They were building something different, a company built on trust, respect, and integrity. And Sarah knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. As the months passed, Sarah's influence continued to grow within the company. What had started as a small shift in Michael's leadership had blossomed into something much larger. The company, once driven solely by profits and growth, now had a clear sense of purpose. They were no longer chasing numbers alone, they were focused on the people behind the business, creating an environment where every employee felt seen, heard, and valued. Michael had come a long way since that pivotal moment when he had asked Sarah for advice. Their partnership had evolved into one built on mutual respect, and she could see the difference it was making not just in the company, but in his personal growth as well. He had become more approachable, more open to feedback, and, most importantly, he was no longer afraid to make difficult decisions based on what was right, not just what was profitable. One afternoon, as Sarah walked into the office, she noticed Michael sitting at his desk, a thoughtful expression on his face. She had grown used to his calm demeanor, but today, there was something different. He looked up as she entered, his eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of determination and gratitude. Sarah, I've been thinking, he began, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. You've been with me every step of the way, and I owe a lot of the success we've had to you. But there's something I want to ask. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious about what he was about to say. Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. I want you to take the next step in your career. I'm offering you the position of Chief Operations Officer. You've earned it. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined this moment, never thought that she would be in a position to lead the company in such a way. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a testament to how far she had come, from a maid in the mansion to a leader within the company. She could hardly believe it. Michael, Sarah started, but her words faltered as she tried to process what he had just said. He held up his hand, cutting her off gently. I know this is a big decision, but I also know that you're the right person for the job. You've got the vision, the integrity, and the leadership skills to take this company further than I ever could on my own. I'm not just offering you a position. I'm offering you a chance to lead this company into its next phase. Sarah stood there for a moment, her mind racing. She had never imagined such an opportunity would come her way. The responsibility, the challenge, the pressure, it was all overwhelming. But deep down, she knew that this was her time. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for. Thank you, Michael, she said finally, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside. I won't let you down. Michael smiled, the pride in his eyes unmistakable. I know you won't. You've already proven yourself more than capable. As she walked out of Michael's office, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had worked so hard to get here, but she had also learned so much along the way. This was more than just a promotion. It was a new chapter in her life, one that she had never thought possible. She wasn't just part of the company anymore. She was part of its future. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Sarah felt confident in her ability to shape it. And with that confidence came the knowledge that no matter what came next, she was ready for it. The days following Sarah's promotion were a blur of excitement, challenge, and personal growth. She was now officially the Chief Operations Officer of Weston Enterprises, a position she had never dreamed of but had worked tirelessly to achieve. The responsibility was immense, but with each passing day, Sarah became more confident in her ability to lead. She worked closely with Michael, who had become more of a mentor than a boss. His trust in her was unwavering, and he continued to lean on her for advice on decisions big and small. The changes they had started together were now taking root, and the company's culture was shifting in a way that felt sustainable. But with the newfound power came new obstacles. There were difficult decisions ahead, and Sarah felt the weight of them more acutely than ever. One of the most pressing issues was dealing with the board of directors, many of whom still held on to the old ways of doing business. They were skeptical of the changes Sarah and Michael had implemented and were concerned about the company's future, given the risks they had taken. Sarah knew she would have to win them over, but it wasn't going to be easy. The first board meeting after her promotion was scheduled, and Sarah could feel the pressure building. She wasn't sure how the board would respond to her new role, or if they would even take her seriously. As she entered the boardroom, she was greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces, most of whom were older, more experienced, and less inclined to change. Michael stood by her side, offering her a quiet nod of encouragement. "You've got this," he whispered before the meeting began. The meeting started with the usual formalities, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The board members were all looking at her, waiting for her to speak. It was her moment to prove herself. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice steady but firm. "As the new Chief Operations Officer, I want to take a moment to address some of the changes we've implemented at Weston Enterprises and why they are essential for our future." There was a slight shift in the room as Sarah spoke. The board members exchanged glances, but she pressed on. "We've focused a lot on profitability in the past, but that can't be the only measure of success. We've made significant strides in improving our company culture, recognizing the importance of our employees and the people who make this business what it is. That's why we've seen an increase in employee engagement, productivity, and even client satisfaction." As she spoke, she could see the skepticism on the faces of some board members, but she didn't let it shake her. "I understand the concern about risks, but I truly believe the direction we're heading is the right one. We're building something more sustainable. We're making decisions based on integrity, and that will pay off in the long run." There was a pause, and for a moment, Sarah thought the room might stay silent. But then, one of the board members, a seasoned executive named Thomas, spoke up. "You've got a point, Sarah. I didn't think I'd hear you say that, but the numbers speak for themselves. Maybe it's time we start looking at things differently." His words were a small victory, but they were a victory nonetheless. One by one, other board members began to voice their support, and by the end of the meeting, it was clear that Sarah had made her mark. The board wasn't entirely convinced, but they were starting to see the value in what she and Michael had been building. As the meeting adjourned, Michael turned to Sarah, a proud smile on his face. "You did it," he said quietly. Sarah felt a rush of relief wash over her. This wasn't just a win for her. It was a win for the entire company, for the vision they had fought for. She knew that this was just one battle in a much bigger war, but it was a step in the right direction. As she left the boardroom, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come. From the shy maid to the Chief Operations Officer, she had defied the odds and proven that with the right values, anything was possible. As the months passed, the success of the new direction Michael and Sarah had taken began to manifest in ways that exceeded even their expectations. The company, once focused solely on profits and growth, had transformed into a thriving organization that prioritized integrity, employee well-being, and sustainable growth. The positive changes were evident not only in the workplace atmosphere, but also in the company's performance. Morale was high, and employee retention was at an all-time peak. Clients were noticing the difference too, with more long-term partnerships being formed as a result of their commitment to ethical practices. The challenges were far from over, but Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that the decisions they made had made a tangible difference. She had witnessed firsthand the power of leading with values and how it could change an entire organization. One day, as she sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports, Michael walked in, holding a celebratory bottle of wine. He smiled, and for a moment, the seriousness of their work faded into the background. "We've done it, Sarah," he said, setting the bottle down on her desk. "Our vision, our values, they've paid off. The company is stronger than ever, and we've just secured another major partnership that aligns perfectly with what we've been working for." Sarah couldn't help but smile. It had been a long journey, filled with moments of doubt and uncertainty, but they had come out on top. "This isn't just your success, Michael," she said, looking him in the eye. "It's ours. All of us. You led the charge, but it was the team, the people we've surrounded ourselves with, that made this possible." Michael nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. You've not only been my partner in business, but also in vision. I'm grateful for everything you've done." As they shared a quiet moment of reflection, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude and pride. She had started as the shy maid, overlooked by many, but now, she was standing beside the CEO of a thriving company, her influence undeniable. This was more than just a career success. It was the realization of everything she had ever dreamed of. She had risen above the expectations set for her, breaking down barriers that once seemed insurmountable. "I never thought I'd be here," Sarah said softly. "But I've learned that anything is possible when you believe in what you're doing." Michael smiled warmly, his admiration for her evident. "And you showed me that, Sarah. You've taught me that leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about making a difference." The rest of the year unfolded with continued success. Sarah's leadership grew stronger, and the company thrived under the values they had implemented. They were no longer just a business. They were a community. And for Sarah, the work wasn't just about the numbers anymore. It was about the lives they were touching and the legacy they were building. As she looked out of her office window one evening, watching the sunset over the city, Sarah realized that she had not only found her place in the world, but had also helped build a place where others could thrive too. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a leader, a change maker, and most importantly, she was someone who had transformed her own destiny. The future, once uncertain, now felt full of endless possibilities.